Hi, welcome to Golden Years. I'm Lori Betts. This month I have guests from Medina County Job and Family Services, so come on back and we'll tell you what's happening in the county.
I called 211.
A free community service that connects you with information about social, health, and government resources specific to Medina County. Call 211 for the info you need 24 hours a day.
211 met my needs. 211 helped my parents. 211 showed me the way. I called 211.
Hi, welcome back to Golden Years. I'm interviewing Mead and Louise from Medina County Job and Family Services. Mead, welcome back.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
Thank you. And Louise, thank you for joining us this month.
Well, thank you for having us.
Okay, what is Job and Family Services?
Well, Medina County Job and Family Services may be one of the better secrets in Medina County and may be actually the second largest insurance company in the county. Medina County Job and Family Services is a county-run, state-administered program, and we operate more than 100 programs that are federal and state and local for residents of Medina County. Our budget, unbelievably, is in excess of $160 million a year. A large part of that budget goes to the aged, blind, and disabled population in the county and supports residents who need a nursing home level of care.
Is it broken down by ages or how?
By the different Medicaid programs, by ages, by need, and again, and there's different programs like Children's Services, Adult Protective Services, and those kinds of different divisions that way.
Okay.
In general, we're divided into two big parts. The first is an area of public assistance, which is the job part of the program, in that we do support low-income families who need health insurance. At this point, we have over 10,000 families that we are insuring in the county for health care. And like I said just a minute ago, we support a very large nursing home population for people who need that level of care that they're not able to pay for as they get older, so that they can be safe and protected.
You are the best kept secret.
We are. Nobody has any idea of the services that we offer. We do offer job support programs, and most of the people who are on what people would know traditionally as welfare programs actually are working and have earned income, but they're working a series of part-time or low-paying jobs and still fall below the poverty guidelines with a number of children in their family.
Okay, that being said, does a person call you direct, or do they have to go through you from another entity?
In both, and they can walk in. So depending on the program, some of it they can access us online, some of it through mail-ins, and then or just come into the office and drop stuff off. Just for people's sake, is that we do have very long lines, and we do actually have a drop-off box right outside the front door. So if people are, just have like a lunch break or something like that, and they have to get back to work, they can just drop their papers off, and it's a 24-hour secured drop box on camera. So that's a safe way to get us information.
Wow, that's amazing.
We do support over 9,000 people on food assistance in the county, and generally speaking, about a third of those are senior citizens. So that's a pretty high number for us for a county as affluent as Medina. We also have child care for working moms. And the thing that we do that is probably the most misunderstood is that if somebody actually does get cash assistance, they are required to work in our factory either 30 or 55 hours a week to get their assistance. So if they get a check of cash check, and you have to be a parent with minor children, you have to take that amount of the check, divide it by the minimum wage, and that's how many hours you have to work for food stamps. And if you're on just straight cash assistance, it's 30 hours a week in our factory that you have to work. And we have less than 100 people in the entire county that fall into that category. So it's I can't even do the math. I mean, you're looking at decimal, a couple decimal points over, simply just to see the number of people who are actually on welfare in the county is 100 out of 180,000. So that's a very, very low number. And I think people don't realize that, again, you have to work to get that, but most of our programs are actually for people who are working, who have earned income, and are just trying to maintain a family and get above the poverty level.
So how do you find the jobs?
We contract. We contract through two different providers. One is Jobs for Ohio Grads, and the second is Medina Assembly and Packaging Company. And we've just recently been able to place over 80 people who had been on assistance in jobs through a grant that we had received from the state. So we're able, in this economy, now there are people hiring again, and we are able to place people and give them support. And what we found is that, in part, getting the job is the easier part. It's keeping it with all the problems with transportation, if there's domestic violence, if there's learning disabilities. So we really try to provide ongoing support to folks so that the first time their car breaks down and they can't go, or their kid's sick and they can't go, or their boyfriend won't let them go because he's jealous of the coworkers, that we're able to help them get over that hump so that they can maintain that employment.
There's a lot going on in that building.
There is. The other part that we work with are protective services for adults and children. And I think we've talked about it before. We are what's known as child welfare agency. Mm-hmm. So any cases of abuse, neglect, or dependency for children, we get the call, we investigate it, we do a risk assessment, and if necessary, we move the children, we put them in foster homes. If after 12 months that risk that was presented to us initially is not corrected, then we would look for an adoptive home for the child so they can have a safe and permanent home. And unfortunately, in that arena, we are just completely overwhelmed because of the opiate-addicted cases right now. And as I've said, you can use opiates, but you can't have your children. I mean, it's just, you cannot. There are some situations where there's some risk that's tolerable, but if you are addicted to opiates of any sort, heroin or the pills, it's a full-time job just to stay high and not get sick, and you're not really capable of parenting under those circumstances. So we do have to step in. Our caseloads have gone much higher, and it's overwhelming for Medina as well as for every other state in this country at this point.
Oh, it has to be very overwhelming.
It is, and it's so hard. There's no really effective treatment for it, and it's destroying good families that are very middle class, college educated families. They're getting hooked because of surgeries, or they're getting hooked for other reasons, and then they just can't really get off of it, and the grandparents then end up raising the children, or they come into foster care, and then we have to find an adoptive home.
So when you get involved in a case, like say someone is looking for the job and you place them, you don't know exactly what's really happening in that person's life until you follow them on the case. Right.
And part of the problem with Ohio is that Ohio is the worst funded child welfare agency in the country.
Why is that?
That's a really good question. I don't know why. I don't know. Okay. But if you doubled the state of Ohio's funding for child welfare, we would still be last. I mean, that's how poorly funded child welfare is in the state of Ohio. Part of the reason is, part of the balance, I don't know why that is, but part of the balance is that most counties have local levies, and Medina is the only county in northeastern Ohio that does not have any levy that supports the child welfare programs. In Medina, all of our costs for all the placements for children who either need foster homes or adoption, or need residential care, either because they're threatening to hurt themselves or hurt others, or have mental health problems, or depressed, or have kind of gotten caught up in a lot of the peer pressure and the internet bullying and stuff, comes directly from the Commissioner's General Fund. So we are almost completely reliant on the generosity of the commissioners for serving children in the community at this point.
Like on a given day when your phone starts ringing, I mean, you never know what's going to happen on the other end when you pick up that phone.
Correct.
I mean, so how many people do you have there and how many specialists?
People actually don't believe, when I tell you this, that we have 5 intake workers for about 60,000 children. People, when I go to meetings and Louise goes to these same meetings, they actually look at us like we're not telling the truth. We have 5 intake workers to investigate any calls from the school, hospital, grandparents, or anybody for, and again, I don't really know.
And we're mandated to do this.
Right.
So when we get calls and we determine that we have to go out, we have to do it. We can't really control our numbers despite our staffing. So even though we're at 5 staff, I mean, we could get, 100 cases a month or 20. I mean, those are the people that we have to go out and do these cases and do this assessment. And
But what if you think it's a minor issue? You still have to go
well,
out?
it depends. We have screening guidelines that are,
Okay.
I guess, established by the state that kind of guide whether we send a social worker out on cases. So that's what we use to determine what our response is to calls that are received at the agency.
But we get calls where the child would come into the school counselor at 2:30 and say, I'm afraid to go home because I'm going to get beaten. We have to get there right then. We don't have any excuse. We can't put them on a waiting list. We're mandated to get there right then. And then, part of the problem is we have to go out and make an assessment on very little information. And, sometimes it gets exaggerated or, partially conveyed.
Sure.
So it's very hard for the workers who go out completely cold, having to make some decision based on 0.1% of the information that turns out later on through the court process or that kind of stuff.
But that's even a guess. You might have a child go into the counselor who's having a bad morning because
Right.
mom said no, and
Exactly.
he thought, I'm going to flip the
Right.
situation around.
Exactly, and that happens. That happens
And
too.
so these cases take a lot of work, a lot of hours to do a complete assessment and meet with everyone in the family, which is what we're mandated to do. Go out to the home, meet with everyone, interview everyone. So even if it's something that may not be exactly what it was presented, we still have to do a lot of different forms, a lot of different assessments to work on that case as we're required to do.
And I'm sure the job doesn't end at 5 o'clock.
Right. We have 24-hour day responsibilities, so sometimes the workers have to go out at 2 o'clock in the morning.
And it's these same workers. We don't have some counties have another set of people that do the after hours response. We don't. It's the same group of social workers that are carrying we have like a pager type of situation after hours and on weekends. So they're the same ones doing that.
And what happens if something started in Cuyahoga County and then comes over to Medina County?
Right, and that's
Are
the
you
problem.
aware of that ahead of time?
Well,
or-
that Cuyahoga, Lorraine, Summit, Wayne, Ashland, I mean, that's one of the problems is with some of the people who, might be involved in drug culture. They're moving around, they're transient, they're staying here, they're staying there. And I think, sometimes they're doing that on purpose to kind of stay out of trouble. They're trying to stay one step ahead of the authorities. So yes, that's very difficult to find people sometimes. And again, between Barberton and Wadsworth, people move back and forth all the time. Those are 2 different counties, and that is a big issue.
You guys almost have to be mind readers.
Well, no, we don't. We follow all the state requirements, our risk assessment tools, but it is difficult because when you look at the case a year later, the risks are much more clear, the strengths are much more clear, but when you go out, again, as I said, I've been to this apartment right across the street from the studio, you just knock on the door, you go up to the 3rd floor, you knock on the door, you don't know who's going to answer the door. They, generally aren't real happy to see us because it's a threat, and you're getting information that's selected by them for you to make decisions on.
Really? And when you're knocking on the door, you don't know what's going to be behind that door either.
Right, absolutely, absolutely.
Wow. Sounds very involved.
It is. But again, when our biggest success is when we get some families that reach out to these children and take them into their homes and give them a safe and secure setting. These children just blossom, and you really feel good about accomplishing something and helping an abused or neglected child turn their life around, and it's not as rewarding. People go, you go see your aunt. Oh, it's really rewarding. Well, it's a lot of problems, but occasionally, when particularly for our foster families, they get to see the real rewards.
So we always try to have children placed with relatives when we have to remove them from homes, but when we can't do that, we have to rely on foster parents. So we're always recruiting, and we always need new foster parents throughout the county to help these children, like Mead's talking about. Take them in and provide them with, shelter and support them and help them through the process.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to take a real quick break and we're going to come back. Welcome back to Golden Years. I'm interviewing Louise and Mead from Medina County Job and Family Services. So we are going to talk now about adult protective services. And I know, being in my world, in the senior world, in the medical equipment and going into houses, I know there's a lot of issues out there. So let's say me, when I go into a person's house and I really think there might be an issue, do I pick up the phone and call you guys, or do I have to call the social worker first? Or how do I deal with that?
You would call our hotline, which is the same hotline that people make child abuse referrals to. So we have a screener who's professionally trained to answer your call and get the information, and then we follow the screening guidelines. Now, what happens for us is adult protective services is a little different than child protective services. There are some things adults are allowed to do that children aren't, but if you do have concerns, now it's...
Whether it's right or wrong,
whether
right?
it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
Well, they have the right to self-determine and make a
Yeah.
lot of decisions for themselves, what kind of what kind of situation they want to live in. Sometimes they want to live in a dirty home, or maybe one that's not the safest. So we have to consider that when we go out and work with adults who are 60 and over in the community, which is what could be an adult protective services case.
Okay.
So, we call it APS, just in case we drop into that. And APS is a state-mandated function for the counties. And the state mandates that we investigate allegations of adult abuse or exploitation. It doesn't require us to do anything about them. The state gives us, you're not going to believe this, our entire funding from the state is $4,000 for the entire county for all of the adults 60 or above.
How do you stretch that?
Well, it's through the generosity of the commissioners. Again, through the commissioners' general fund, they do provide some funding for us so that we can have a worker and a half for all of the older adults in the county. Louise, as the social services administrator over all of child welfare, over all these other programs, also directly works with the adult protective service clients, has adult protective service cases, leaves her office to go out to the county home and help people, and just helps our 1.5 workers meet all of these high-level needs for all the older adults in the county.
And sadly, there are needs.
And there are.
Right, because the population is growing. I think every time we go to a meeting, we talk about the older adult population in our county and throughout the country is growing. So we're continuing to see that need grow. On a monthly basis, we have about 20 to 30 cases. In March, we exceeded 30 cases. And again, that's for a full-time and a part-time social worker. We have all those cases. And it's different than child welfare, but no less involved. When we go out, a lot of times it's working with the family. We have to do the assessments, work with the family, make sure that we have a safety plan in place, how we can keep that person, because most of the time they want to stay in the community, they want to stay in their home. How can we make that happen? Sometimes we have to engage family from California, can you come in and meet with us? Getting in-home services in place. Things like that. A couple of cases that we've been dealing with lately, we have situations where there's animal hoarding. We had a case recently where there was a woman living, she had chickens in her basement, she had a dead dog in her living room, horses like out back, she wasn't feeding herself, And she was really not incompetent, but really just thought this was an okay living situation, but she had to be taken out of the home. The police were involved, the SPCA, but we were heavily involved in that to get her into a long-term safe situation. Trying to engage her family, working with the court, did she need a guardian, things like that. So, and that's one case, but we've had a lot of cases where it's to that extreme, you know, where the condition of the home was just probably one of the worst ones we've ever seen. And she was in her early 70s. Also what we're seeing a lot of is exploitation cases where we had a case recently where a woman was in her 90s and there was concern that she was being exploited. And we got a call at 4:30 on a Friday that she was getting evicted from an assisted living facility because her family was not taking care of the bill. So we had to scramble and find her a place to go because they weren't getting paid and the family was not taking care of her financial affairs, even though there was a POA in place. So that was a real crisis, and the case is continuing to go on today. And again, trying to work with these relatives to get her on Medicaid and plan for her. And again, we're almost to that same point where she may be evicted again from the last place that we found before, the only place that would take her. So those are just kind of examples of the types of cases that we work with.
And getting the family involved, I'm sure, is really a tough situation.
It can be very challenging because what you're dealing with a lot of times is maybe some estrangement, things that happened 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You have family they don't want, we haven't talked in 20 years. Well, your mom really needs your help. Well, but I can't do it. I can't help you out. I don't want to be involved. So we get a lot of that, or we get maybe the opposite of that, which is a lot of family conflict, where maybe one child wants the person to be in a nursing home, the other one's we'll have her in the home and take care of her. And we see a lot of older adults who need 24-hour care. And sometimes that's really, with family members, they don't believe that, or they don't think that's necessary. So again, we have to ensure that that happens. We can't walk away until there's a good plan in place for that to happen. And a lot of times that's the family involved in that.
You don't look stressed at all. I mean, that's a big challenge, when you approach
it can be challenging. We see a lot of good things happen, though, too, on these cases. Yeah, I mean, when we can close our case, and sometimes it takes months to do that. Sure. Mead talked about our responsibility is to investigate, but in reality, that's not really realistic. I mean, once we're involved, we have to, if we don't do it, no one else really does it. We have to make sure that there's a safe resolve for the older adult. So that could take 3 or 4 months, or until we go to court and help get a guardian in place. So it's a long process.
And I'm sure the child that lives out of state calls mom every day, but says, "Hi, Mom, how are you? Do you need anything?" I mean, she could just be lying through her teeth.
Right.
And
and a lot of times, they have no idea what's going
they're clueless.
on. And because of how families are these days, a lot of people do have to live out of state because of work and different things. So a lot of times we are successful at engaging the family and getting them to come in and step up and be responsible. And that's the best case scenario in these situations.
But you've had cases where like a couple would have had no children, one of the spouses died, and then you're like taking to the dentist appointment, or you're even, I mean, we physically have to do things because they don't have children to take care of them.
And there's a lot of people like that, and they really rely on the system, and they rely on Adult Protective Services to have companionship, which really is way beyond what we do, but they're lonely and they like us coming out, or I need your help, Yeah. So there are a lot of older adults now that don't have any support system. And again, and they'll even call us themselves and say, "I need help." The older adult will call the agency.
That's a good start.
And sometimes those turn out to be very involved cases too, or trying to get them to the right place or get the right services in place.
Because when you're driving down the street, you see all these houses, you have no idea who has issues, who's living alone.
And then again, with this group, they tend to be isolated, and nobody would even know that they existed or assume somebody else is taking care of them.
Exactly. And if you don't have family and friends, or if your loved ones passed and friends passed too, they're all living older now.
Right.
And again, there's issues of substance abuse with this population that's well hid, nobody wants to see.
Not in Medina County.
Well, and our office used to be right next to the liquor store, and you would just see, if it opened at 10 o'clock, at 9:45, the couple of cars would pull up, and people with gray hair would be sitting there waiting for the doors to open and walk in, and then, again, they have a whole lot of prescriptions that don't mix well with
Oh,
alcohol,
definitely.
and they don't want to be found. I mean, they're into that addiction lifestyle, and
Mental illness too, and what we run into, we have a couple
Dementia.
cases right now where we have really mentally ill older adults, and they don't want to go out anywhere to get any help, and we don't really have a service that can come in and help them. So even through Adult Protective, we're kind of keeping these cases open because my social workers will say, well, someone needs to check on them, and there's no other mechanism to do that. So we're seeing a lot of mentally ill older adults who don't have any support, family, friends, and then they don't want to go out, maybe, paranoia, delusions, things like that.
I went out with one of the cases with one of the workers, and it was an older gentleman. His son was getting his money, would just take him out to Burger King or something once a month when the check came in, then took the rest of his money. This gentleman was had a high level of confusion and possibly even dementia, and he had a gun that was loaded, and he thought people were trying. So we had to go out there, and he has a loaded gun and is very paranoid and very much not reality-based, and was thinking people were trying to get him and that kind of stuff, and he had a loaded gun that had to be dealt with, that he did not want to part with, and as a citizen, he was allowed to have that gun, but most people
True.
in the apartment building didn't think it was a really good idea that he had that.
So you do get the police involved in that situation,
Right.
because you have to protect yourselves too. while you're
And
trying to
other
protect
residents. I
them.
mean, it's one thing to
True.
self-harm, but again, if you're
Right.
self-harm, then begins to impact other people, and again,
We've seen that a lot, where we've had older adults with weapons and they really shouldn't have them. We've had to have their children come over and remove them, or the police, and that's really pretty common.
right.
All right, so what would you leave with my viewers if they think they're in some type of situation? Pick up the phone and call you guys?
Right. And the way that it works is that our reporting laws are based on infectious disease reporting laws, in that they can be anonymous. If somebody does call, whether it's for children or adults, if we know who they are, it's good for us to call them back if we need additional information. But they can make it anonymous, and we then try to ensure that anonymity. Sometimes it's a dead giveaway if I just saw you with your red sweater on, and somebody calls and says that, well, they know who it was. But we don't give that information away. It's our job to determine the validity of the allegation. So we're not asking people to do the investigation or to make sure one way that they call us. It's our job to do that investigation. All they're doing is raising a concern.
But for children and adults, we document all of our calls, even if we don't open the case or send a social worker out at that time. So it's really important that people call us, because when we do get a call again, we look at all the information we have. So it's really important that we have, your call may not be enough, but if we get another call, it's like, okay, this is our second call. We really need to look into this. So that we document all our calls really helps us make the decision, and that's why people should call us at our screening desk to report any concern about a child or an adult, older adult.
If one of my viewers has a concern, what phone number would they reach you at?
They would call 330-661-0800. That's our child abuse and adult abuse screening desk number, and they can report the concern to that person.
Okay, and they're not committed, and like you said,
Can be
They
anonymous.
can
No
remain
name or nothing.
anonymous,
Anonymous, okay.
during that process, yes.
But we don't know what we don't know. So if you don't call and you think somebody else is going to call, that may or may not be true.
that's a very good comment, because we don't know what goes on.
Right. Right.
Well, and what else do you want to leave with my viewers?
Well, and again, this is a service. It's not, again, for Adult Protective Services, all we have to do is investigate. We can go out and say, yes, this is horrible. There's a dead dog in the living room, and walk away. And we've done our mandate. The commissioners have been very clear that they want us to try to help these families and provide the casework for them, relative to, I mean, Medina is a great place to live, and
Oh, it
everybody
is.
should have a good quality of life. So again, it's really the commissioner's directive to us that we provide this service, even though we don't have to.
And repeating what I have said in the past, Medina is so good to their people.
They
You young and elderly.
It's a very caring community.
Very caring. So there's always help out there.
Right.
Right.
So even if you have a neighbor that might think there's something going on in a house, pick up the phone
Absolutely.
and call you
Yes.
and just say, you know, I have a neighbor that might have some concerns.
Right.
Great.
Well, you guys really have, I think, a difficult job, but you're pros and you're professionals in your field, so I'm sure they're going to get the right help.
Good, thank you.
thank
So
you.
thank you for being on Golden Years this month.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for watching Golden Years. And remember, May is the big month for mothers. So please pick up that phone, go to the store, think of mom. We'll see you next month.